It's Lisa from Been There, Got Out, and now we are on for real with New Jersey divorce and family law attorney, Melissa Cohen. She's from New Jersey. There she is. Oh, I love when people just come on. It's so smooth. Let's see if this works. Melissa and I met virtually maybe like a few weeks ago. There she is.
Hi.
Yeah, hi. And I was just saying we just met like a few weeks ago and talked about doing an interview, and I love that you've got like a lot of energy, and I know that this is going to be a really lively conversation. I think of you as like a bit of a spitfire.
Right. Well, we really connected in our call. That doesn't happen all the time, right? When you meet people who are strangers and then you get on the call, it's like a blind date, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Like,
yeah, so this is I know this is gonna be a fun one. So for the people that didn't pop on 8 minutes ago, Melissa, can you reintroduce yourself? Tell us who you are, a little bit about your background, and then I'll start peppering with you with questions.
okay, sure. So I am Melissa Cohen. I am a divorce and family law attorney at Sane Family Law, which is in Cranford, New Jersey. So kind of north, kind of central in New Jersey, but we practice all the way from the top of North Jersey to, I would say, Monmouth Ocean type area. We do all aspects of family law, divorce, custody, child support, prenuptial agreements, domestic violence. We have an attorney at our office that does the child protective services docket. So we really run the whole gamut of family law. I graduated from Seton Hall Law School. I was counting the years when we went off. Seton Hall Law School 21 years ago. And then I clerked for a family court judge in Paterson in Passaic County. And then I have been practicing in private practice in family law ever since.
And I was saying you don't look weathered enough to have done it for that long.
Right. And if anyone, I answered that I came home from work early, thanks to my boss who let me go so I could make sure I fixed my face before we went live. So yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so I know that you do your job really well, and you have some other experience. Did you work for something called the Center for Hope?
No, we volunteer through a program, sometimes for domestic violence pro bono work. It's called the Partners program, and I do some pro bono domestic violence work through that program.
Okay, so you're one of those wonderful unicorns that's a lawyer that has some training and experience with domestic violence, because I know many people in our community who are watching now and who will watch later are looking for attorneys. They're always like, how do I find a lawyer who understands what I'm dealing with? Because so many lawyers actually don't.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yes, we practice domestic violence at our firm in private practice. I'm lucky enough to work somewhere that really promotes and believes in giving back to the community. It was really important to me too, after working in this sector for so long, to feel like you're giving something back. This can be an emotionally challenging area of practice, and that work for me specifically, I can't speak for every lawyer. Some lawyers shy away from it, but I really care for this case type, and with most types of work, when you care about what you're doing and you love what you're doing, you do a good job at it, right? And so, yeah, myself and several of the other attorneys in my office, we definitely handle domestic violence cases.
So what do you think makes you good, or what do you think made you gravitate towards the DV cases? Because, again, like you noted yourself, some lawyers are like, I don't want to deal with it. I know our clients, because we are high conflict divorce coaches, and that ours are very needy and often are terrified, more terrified than someone going through an amicable situation. So many attorneys say, even my own lovely divorce attorney from years ago was like, I don't want your clients because it's too much.
That's interesting, because most of my friends who practice in this area, they don't mind doing this type of work either. So in New Jersey, it can be a great way also for a young attorney or a younger attorney to gain some trial experience. You know, if we're doing our job well as family lawyers, trials are few and far between. And that's the great part of our practice. The flip side of that is, of course, we are litigators, and litigators appear in court, and litigators need trial experience. So often domestic violence cases are a good way for young attorneys to get involved in litigation and involved in having a hearing or trying a case and preparing evidence and witnesses that may not be a full-blown matrimonial trial, but still give you that great courtroom experience. Another reason is sometimes they're the natural progression, unfortunately, in a divorce action, or a domestic violence incident will start a divorce action. So really, our clients want one attorney for both, because a lot of times the issues, particularly right with support or, emergent support or temporary support and temporary custody issues, it helps. There are times when sometimes we'll need a criminal attorney to come in, depending on what the issue is, but that is also sort of how that happens. The other thing is, to be good at this type of work, you have to care about people. I know that sounds cliche, but it really is true at the end of the day. And I think that sort of also ties into it, right? Because this is something that this is work that's meaningful.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I find it I'm not an attorney, but I find working with this community I can not only relate to, but it is very rewarding.
Right.
But it's tragic. It's tragic also.
It's tragic also, too. I mean, there's just so much. I know we talked about this when we met that ties into it. There are people who don't fall under the statute for protection and use the statute for protection. So you have to be very careful about that, right? Because if a law is there to protect victims, then we want to make sure it's used appropriately. And so that ties into it. And then there are so many aspects, like I know you were telling me about your work, so much invisible domestic violence, so much that happens that's not the physical abuse. So many times still in this day and age, clients say, well, I wasn't assaulted, so.
Right. So it's not that bad, right? It's not that bad.
Right.
People minimize their own experience. And also it's minimized externally because people think, well, at least they didn't hit you.
Oh, I know. I can't believe they'll be saying that. I mean, New Jersey is great, and I'm sure probably maybe ahead of the curve of other states, because we have many predicate acts of domestic violence that do not relate to physical assault. And I know you said you were even working on some really important legislation in other states to take it even a step further, which I was so impressed with when we met, going down that whole concept of coercive control.
Right.
Really the domestic violence that, financial abuse, the things that you don't see on the surface.
Right, but that affect everything, especially safety and custody issues. Like it's almost like looking at the bigger picture rather than just the obvious physical.
Right. I mean, it's so, and then you get into the proofs issue, right? What's the truth versus what's the provable truth, and how people can prove their truth in a courtroom. And that, that lies in the challenge, right?
Yeah, that's not everything, but that is everything, but there's so many elements to that, we know.
Right.
But I know today I want to talk about something you said would be really interesting that we haven't talked about before, and that's how the pandemic has affected your job and the legal system, the court system, especially family court. So tell us about that, and then we'll get into some details.
Okay, right. That's funny. When we went down all of our rabbit holes when we were talking, got to talking about how the profession and the practice of law has changed, at least in the family court system. Obviously, immediately in March 2020, we went to a virtual format, which was amazing. I was so impressed at how quickly the judiciary adapted to, I remember when I clerked 21 years ago, I mean, the computer system looked like ancient. I can't even picture in my head that they had the capability to access their computers from home, but somehow they figured it out. All the judges figured out Zoom and Teams, and we kind of all did too, and figured it out right away. And so many things have changed. Obviously, I think there's been some good for the clients, right? There has been a lot of billable time where we would go and sit in a courtroom and wait our turn and drive for travel time. That doesn't have to happen anymore for simple proceedings, conferences, and things like that, which in some way can be very beneficial, right, to the client. There's flip sides of that, though, where, this group of clients that since March, we've had clients we've never met in person, clients who've many never stepped foot in a courtroom. And when you don't step foot in a courtroom, there is a little bit something that's lost. And that is, you know, the court always felt like if clients saw how long you sit and wait your turn, how many times you have to come to court to do that, how much time translates into money with counsel, that could, you know, be beneficial in sending a message on why you should settle your case. Or sometimes you could be sitting in the courtroom for a conference or a very contested proceeding, but you see somebody in front of you getting their divorce and reaching that day. And maybe that had a little bit of a motivating factor. There was also a lot of settlement while people are standing around waiting their turn. And so some of that is lost. On the flip side, I think there's so much more time efficiency for us as attorneys. We can fit more into a day, for better or worse, right? Sometimes we have a judge who will say, I need you at 9. And you say, well, I'm on a proceeding at 9. Okay, I'll take you at 10. We're in the in-person days, that kind of stuff could never happen.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes if I wouldn't mind if you're in one county, you were on your feet at a conference, one judge might take you at 9 and then you run around the corner and go for 10. But it wasn't as much overlap. Now it's if you're at your computer, what difference does it make if a judge in Morris County has you at 9? If a judge in Ocean County, an hour away, wants you at 11, you're just sitting at your desk, so you can do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love the part about saving, you know, a client saving money. And what you said, too, about the in-person part, pressuring people to settle. I mean, like, it's also really uncomfortable, I think, as someone myself. Like, I prefer to be in person, but I can see why all of that time. I mean, I think of all of the money and energy and the fear and the trauma of having, even just walking into a courthouse where you're like, oh, gosh, I have to do this again, and going through security, and is he going to be in the elevator? Like, the lawyer's here and they're sitting on that bed. Like, it's just so stressful.
That's a good point to tell that from the litigant's perspective. I do think sometimes attorneys are, you know, this is our job, so that doesn't resonate as much with us. But I remember years ago, not myself, but my former coworker had a lovely client, and she was doing fine and she was doing great until some of the judges had like a computer screen, so they were typing up the order at counsel table. You could see it. And just when she saw the caption of her name versus her husband's name, that was the thing that made her lose it. Really? Everything else, yeah, fine and strong. And so you just never know. That's a really good point. For some people, going into courtroom is traumatic. In New Jersey, they do keep the domestic violence plaintiffs separate from the defendants. I don't know if it's like that in other states, but in many court houses, there's like a separate waiting room for the victims.
See, what about, so a lot of our clients, it's custody issues, but it's mixed with domestic violence. So it's not like they're there for a restraining order. They're there for a custody issue, but there is all kinds of, you know, there's so much history with the case that it still feels like it is a domestic violence case. It's just not, that's not the motion.
That's not what they're there for. Well, in New Jersey, I mean, whether there's domestic violence is one of the custody factors.
Oh, okay.
You know, for the court to consider. When the court considers the elements of the statute, that is one of them, right? Okay. Whether you have domestic violence or whether there's a denial of parenting time not based upon substantiated abuse. So both are.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Our puppy is making some noise. Okay. I was going to say another thing that we talked about that certainly was affected with the pandemic is something you get the credit for coining the term single parenting Olympics.
So I don't get credit entirely for coining that. So I have, just kind of ties into what you and I were talking about and the great work you do. Like, you are an extension of the person's support network. So one of the things I always say to people when I meet them the first time, or maybe after they hire me, is who's in your network? Who's your support system? Does anyone know you're getting a divorce? Or is your parent supportive? Is your best friend know? Because without that support, it's really hard to get through. I happen to be blessed with, and I have seen some of them joining, so they're all going to know what I'm talking about, this amazing network of other single parents who are also attorneys. And we are, you know, all doing our same job. They're not all family attorneys. Some, you know, we do a whole variety throughout the friend group, but we were talking during the pandemic while we're working from home and holding up our end of the practice and working full time and working in our home. That's also our office. That's also our kids' classroom, and never leaving. And we're keeping our kids alive during a pandemic while we're, arguing in court. And, that is the single parenting Olympics. That is really the challenge of all challenges, right? It's always hard to be a working parent. It's always challenging to be a single parent in some regards. But we were, during the pandemic, it was like single parenting up here.
Yeah, absolutely. And not just for attorneys. I mean, it's so tricky to constantly be distracted, and that's a whole
working while we're like, is this my house? Is it my office? Is it my schoolroom? It's everything all at once.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned something that we should note is that as a lawyer, I know with our people, they expect you to be available all the time.
We did
tell us about that.
Right. So this is obviously not something that I think clients ever think from the attorney's perspective, nor should they. I mean, they're looking at it from their lens because it's their hard time. But like what you and I were talking about, it used to be everybody was in their office from 9 to 5, client call you at lunchtime, emailed you if they could. Once everybody was home and people had your cell phone for the first real time, there used to be a lot of boundary there. The boundaries were off, and it wouldn't be unusual to receive 30, 40 emails on a case in a day. And it meant with no harm, but hard from the attorney's perspective nonetheless. And then we were talking about, right, clients used to come in, it would be time to produce discovery. They would come in with a big stack of papers and you'd sit together and label them. And now it's, 100 emails with 100 documents. And that can be hard and time consuming from the attorney's perspective, which I know you were saying is one of the ways as a divorce coach you help.
Right. We call that targeted documentation. We say, because the word is always document everything. But when you document everything, you have binders and binders of stuff. And then we always say, if you throw it over the fence to your attorney, I would say throw it in the back of the car, then it's thousands and thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours. And why should an attorney have to sort through things? And why should you be paying for stuff that's not really relevant to the motion or the issue? So it is really important.
How do you help clients? How do you help your clients do that to help support them as a divorce client? How do you do that?
Okay, so for example, one of the things we say, because I used to be a high school English teacher, so we use a lot of education metaphors. We say we want you to be the teacher's pet of clients for your attorney. So from speaking to several family lawyers, one in particular in my area said, I asked him what kind of client he likes. He said, I like someone the opposite of me. I like someone who's really organized, who comes in with spreadsheets, charts, things in folders related to like a specific issue. So sometimes we'll talk about custody fact, like often, like I said before, the abuse stuff gets blended in with the custodies, and because our clients are dealing with so much and they're overwhelmed with their lives and their cases. And it's almost like they're barely in survival mode. So we say, okay, let's try to get you focused on what is the issue that's coming up. And then my background as a high school English teacher and a writing teacher is I talk about the hamburger essay, which is basically the 5-paragraph essay. So introduction, conclusion, and like the meat of it. So say there's a bunch of custody issues that you're concerned about. Let's find like a couple that matter the most, and let's go over what you think would be the most important. Some things are not relevant. Like, for example, if your ex is feeding them junk food, nobody cares about that. If your ex is showing up late to pick up by 10 minutes, nobody cares about that. Bedtime, nobody cares about that. But these are the things that they do care about. So let's see what you have to build a case, or we call it like make a Super Bowl commercial. You have 30 seconds. Are you going to waste it talking about things that the judge doesn't care about, or are you going to waste that giving all this stuff to your attorney that you're going to be spending money and time, whatever? So really like helping them focus on what they need to provide to the attorney so that the attorney can do his or her job much more easily, and then think of you as like, oh, I like this client. I know my attorney was like, I'm not going to charge you because I like you. I'll not charge you for this, that, and the other thing. So, and other attorneys said the same thing. Like, if I like you, just like in any field, then I'm not going to hold you to everything. And that way you can, as an attorney, you can take on more cases and not be as kind of bogged down with the stuff that our clients are dealing with. Like I think I told you, we call it the harsh New York reality check. Like they'll come in and be like, but, and we're like, but that actually doesn't really matter. And you're going to be spending lots of money with an attorney who's going to tell you this, probably the same thing, like try it. But just from what we've seen, that doesn't tie in with the stuff that counts.
Hard too for people who are experiencing it, because it's very real to them at the time, and some of those small things can have a really big impact on the child. But that's a great service you provide, because the judge might hear that your kids are 10 minutes late coming home, but have 3,000 cases, right, where 1,500 of them, the same thing is happening. Or judges are
a lot worse than that.
Right. Judges are people, right? And that's always a fine line, and always a balance that we're doing. What is super important versus what is important to you, but not necessarily important to the court. One of the things that I know we try to do in our firm, and I've always tried to do in my practice, is share the statute, the custody statute, with the clients early on. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people don't even realize there's actually elements of the law that the court has to provide. The court has to assess when they're making a decision. So I like to share it, and we tell people, organize your thoughts under each point, kind of, especially at the beginning, to get started, so you can see what the court is going to consider. Like you said, is the court going to consider that they're late every 10 minutes, or the court going to consider that the child witnessed domestic violence in the home? Those are two very big differences.
Yeah, so like the statutes you talk about, we often use things like that too. We have more general ones because our clients are all over America and the world. But we'll say, here's the things that generally matter. But we do a lot of that hand holding. So often we'll have a client who'll say, my attorney gave me the statutes, but I can't, like, I'm paralyzed. I don't even know where to start. And so then we'll like talk them through it and be like, okay, and help them get their thoughts together, just like a writing tutor in some ways, which is what I did in my other life.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay. Someone had asked a question before I get to my next question about how do you, because you have this background as domestic violence attorney, how do you have mediation with an ex where there is a protective order present? Is that even possible? I know the answer, but I'm gonna let you answer it.
New Jersey, generally no. So you can't go to custody and parenting time mediation. Every county has a program through the court where, and again, I'm talking generally pre-pandemic, because maybe things are a little bit different now. So we'll talk about that kind of separately. You can't attend. There's a restraining order. You can't be in the same place. It was often in a little closet-sized conference room in the courthouse that they provide the mediators, and that's a no-go. There are a few domestic violence approved mediators. So generally the answer is no. There are some. In the pandemic, because things were virtual and on Zoom with the ability to keep people completely separate, I did, and everybody consented in writing to it, did have a case where there was a final restraining order, and we did mediation, but myself and my client were in one breakout room, and the mediator went back and forth, and the wife and her attorney were in another breakout room, and as I said, we all consented, and that worked out fine. And so I think maybe the virtual worlds might help facilitate that along, right? So really, you shouldn't end up in a trial just because there is a restraining order. If you have two good attorneys, hopefully there's a way to work around that. Nobody is ever put in a situation, though, by the court where there's discomfort. I did years ago. We had a case that this is going on 20 years ago, where there was a final restraining order and the judge ordered the parties to mediation. Everybody was horrified, but the mediator just did their best and kept everyone separate. And we walked, the victim was my client, walked her to her car and did the best we could.
Yeah, I mean, the term I've heard used is closed mediation, where it's like completely separate. But I was going to say, everybody wants things to settle before trial. So, and our clients do have a lot of restraining orders, but do you have any recommendations on how people can negotiate, but other than in person or even closed mediations? Like, it just seems like you're at a disadvantage. I mean, not that you want to mediate, but what are some alternatives?
I think that's a great question. I mean, I think if there's counsel, then there's the ability to mediate, because well, I've had one where the litigant is on the phone and you're present, right? And you call with authority. You've done things like that, or you know, the court can have a settlement conference but keep both parties completely separate. I actually think there's one place where the pandemic will help promote things like that. It's hard though. I mean, it's definitely harder. And if you're not represented by counsel, I mean, those cases can't settle because there's no ability to speak at all. I mean, sometimes we do see, and if anyone from my firm is on here, they're going to know what I'm talking about, but, you know, cases where there's a final restraining order and the court still yet carves out that the parties still have to speak relative to the children or the child, and use programs like Our Family Wizard or other communication programs to do it. And I know a lot of people who have strong feelings on that. And that really gets to probably where a lot of your work comes in, how those issues are all tied in. Is the person who has the restraining order against them going to use that tiny loophole as a method to further abuse?
The answer is yes.
Right.
Like constantly. Because they're like, we're not allowed to be in contact, but we have to be in contact for the kids.
Right.
We have to have a co-parenting relationship.
So many challenges that don't have the right answer for anybody. You know, that's why sometimes I know myself and other attorneys in my firm, we act as parenting coordinators. I don't know if you have that where you are, where sometimes we're appointed or selected by the court. That can help sometimes facilitate communication. As I've said, people use the Our Family Wizard program when there is the safest way for there to be contact. You know, there's a tone meter to some of those programs. I know we have certain cases where there's a restriction on how many times a week there can be sent, how many emails can be sent. I've been involved in a few cases like that. Even one once where there wasn't a restraining order, but my client was just so inundated with communication that a judge in Bergen County said, one email twice a week, that's it. Nobody else, right? And not a 10-page, I think it was like 1 3-paragraph email, because the truth is, what can't you say?
Yeah. I mean, we have clients who their orders say you're not allowed to use the word you.
Like, in what context? Like
communication. You can't say you.
What do you say?
I don't know. I think, like, I mean, we've had a lot of fun doing strategic communications around that. But yeah, we just get creative. Yeah, they're not allowed to say you. Like
you did this and you did that type of thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's intended like that, like the accusations, but it seems a little extreme. I think sometimes judges might make some orders that are a little bit vague and open to interpretation, and people are just like, I just want to be really careful, but I'm not supposed to say certain things.
Oh, I have not seen that before.
Yeah.
I've not seen. I have.
It's
seen,
only one. I'm only thinking of one person, and that person knows who they are.
What state was that?
Do
you remember?
I think it's Wisconsin, maybe.
I have a friend who practices family law in Wisconsin. I'm going to talk to her.
Yeah, it might be a neighboring state. It might be a neighboring state. I'm not going to say it just because of the case.
No, we'll talk about it.
Yeah. No, okay.
That's tough.
I know. And the other thing is, even though Our Family Wizard has a tone meter and all the other stuff, there isn't, like, I don't use it, but somebody said that they thought that a court was monitoring all the communications. But nobody is actually peeking in or doing anything about it, right? It's more like, okay, if they're breaking all this stuff or they're going against the tone meter, whatever it is, it's still, the burden's on you to take it to court and do something, right? It's not like some like Wizard of Oz person comes in and says, oh, they're in trouble.
So what happens is, I know obviously the court could not possibly have the manpower to do something like that. But I know if I'm the parenting coordinator, or times where I've been appointed as a guardian ad litem, the attorneys always include that you have to have access to our family wizard. Not that I obviously sitting there policing all of it, but that is a place where sometimes that oversight comes in, for sure. I have definitely seen that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
yeah, I didn't think about that.
they like that a little bit better. Something about texting is so, mentally speaking, is so immediate, right? So when someone sends you a text, it's even different from an email, right? An email means get back to me when you can, but a text means get back to me right now.
Because you have your phone on you all the time.
Correct. So I think our family wizard is, meant to sort of, kind of like you said, put that behind the curtain a little bit. So it's not like constant, although I know sometimes there's like an alert that you have a family wizard message. So maybe that does that.
We had a fun discussion in our, we do this, I think I told you, we have a weekly legal abuse support group, and we had a fun discussion on the different sounds that people use for their exes, our family wizard signal.
Oh, that's funny. We be very careful with that. And you can take this to your practice. We've had clients, again, if my coworkers are watching, they'll laugh, but we have clients who, they'll save their former spouse in their phone with something that, probably to them is a warning, do not text. But then when you print it out and try to use it for evidence, it's not a good sign. If you have devil horns next to your ex, I'm pretty sure a court doesn't like that. So that's something for you to look out for.
I'm smiling and laughing because in the past, years ago, my attorney was like, Lisa, we cannot have this name here.
Right.
We cannot have the judge see this name.
Right.
I was like, okay, oops. We could just cut that part off. Yeah. So anyway, the other thing, let's see, I had taken a couple of notes. Oh, I was going to say, how common is this with your clients saying their number one goal is, I want the judge to validate. I want the judge to hear and understand what I'm going through.
Oh, it's really interesting that you say that. I don't hear a lot of clients express it that way, which is a very eloquent way of saying a lot of times other things they say. And I think it's great if you're training people in your work to phrase it that way. I think is great, because I don't hear a lot of people put it that way.
But we're telling them not to. We're saying that it's not going to happen. We say like that's not the like the judge is not the like God that's going to somehow punish and do like you do need to get across to a judge certain things, but that's not going to be the thing that makes you feel much better. You're not going to get like justice.
Right. Oh, I know. I think we tell people that a lot. I think more people do the, it's not fair, or a lot of times we see like a court order be entered and then, clients say, well, the court's not doing it. Constantly monitoring every case after they enter an order. If you want to do something about it thereafter, you have to seek enforcement, which is a very frustrating part of our job, right? You can have an order, and how many times have we said to a court in an enforcement action, you've given me an order that the other person said, and then what do I tell my client? And we have that problem a lot. But I actually think, we have people express a lot, I'm concerned about my kids, I'm concerned no one's listening, or there are things that happen. And sometimes it's frustrating. Hard part of our job is to look at people and say, what's important to you may not be considered by the court. That's a very hard part of what we do. Yeah,
definitely. Okay, so speaking of that, one of the things that comes up all the time, especially in these domestic violence cases, are relocations. I want to move really far away with the kids. Yeah. Tell us your experience with relocation.
So it's an interesting area of the law. I know it's very state specific, very, very state specific. It is, in more recent years, as the law evolves, and this area of the law has evolved. It's gone through different iterations by case law and has changed over time. Even in the 21 years I've been practicing, I think there's been, 2 or 3 iterations of the law. Presently, the law is, I think, a little bit more challenging to relocate from the state of New Jersey, at least. It's a best interest standard. So it had gone from a consideration of what type of parenting plan was in place. So let's say it's post-judgment. What type of parenting plan was in place? Is there a shared parenting plan? If so, then there was one standard. And if there was more of a primary custody situation to one parent, a different standard, and therefore more easy to go. On an initial custody determination, always kind of the best interest standard. But now I do consider it slightly more challenging. I don't consider it to be, or at least I've never been involved in a case of domestic violence so severe that informs the relocation. That's an interesting point. I'll share it with you if a case like that ever comes down the pike. I have definitely seen people move. I've tried a case to conclusion in recent years where my client won the right to relocate to the state of Florida. She had met someone else and had moved on in her life. And, you know, there was a best interest evaluation and a wonderful expert who helped determine those factors, and an excellent trier of fact who really tuned into the intangibles of what was happening between the parties. But I will say, not easy, but I would be very interested in dealing with a case like you're saying, where there was very severe domestic violence, and see how that informs.
Yeah, I mean, it comes up a lot. It comes up a lot with our clients, and many of the attorneys we speak to say it's tricky. We've asked, like, what factors would help somebody, you know, have a better chance of getting a relocation, but there's no guarantees. We do say that if you say, I just want to get the kids away from this other parent, even though they still have custody, that's not going to look good at all.
I think that's just challenging. I mean, at least here in New Jersey, the court is going to make some kind of temporary orders as to parenting time. If a case comes in as a domestic violence case, sometimes people don't file for divorce right away, or maybe they were never married. But if anything, the parenting time or temporary parenting time is going to be decided at the end of the restraining order piece. And then you're back to the divorce, whether that remains the final order or then there's custody evaluation. So it may be kind of steps. I think if you had a case where there was a final restraining order, which is what we call it in New Jersey, a final restraining order, and there was no parenting time, or there was final restraining order and supervised parenting time, may be much easier to go. And I think at that point you're looking to build the case around, is there family in the new location and financial support in the new location and things like that. You know, I've often considered the relocation law and whether this whole people working from home is going to negatively impact the ability to relocate. To just define some of our more major relocation cases would be like, I'm an executive at Deutsche Bank and you have to do your time overseas.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What happens? And so there was like a real, you know, is the court faced with, am I going to lose my job or let go? Real hard issues. But I think now that those kind of things may go away with so much hybrid and remote work.
Yeah, another effect of the pandemic. Yeah. Okay, so we got a question a little bit earlier, and I can imagine what you're going to say. Have you ever had a case where someone's a victim, but they are called the abuser all the time?
Oh, all the time. Yes, all the time. Where there's substance abuse, but the person who is, you know, suffering the challenges projects that onto others, and sometimes that's very, very obvious. But yes, I believe that happens in the domestic violence cases. I don't know if I've ever tried a domestic violence case where that wasn't the defense in some way. Yeah,
all the time. Okay, tell us about your friends and cocktail parties.
Oh, this is funny. We talked about this. So what's the expression your friend used, which I was like, oh my God, that's so brilliant. Barstool. Oh, barstool counseling. Yeah, that's my question after. Yes. So this is a funny story. So I remember my criminal law professor, who is a wonderful, wonderful professor. And on the first day of class, he was like, welcome to your attorney training, otherwise known as you'll never be able to attend a cocktail party again, where somebody doesn't come up to you and say, I slip and fell in ShopRite last week, or I hired a contractor and he started the work and never came back. He's like, that is your future and your life. You know, being that once people hear you're an attorney, they want your legal advice on anything and everything. And we always say, right, I'm a family law attorney. It's like going to the foot doctor for a heart attack, right? If you have a slip and fall, I will send you to my wonderful friend who's a personal injury attorney, and he will help you. That's
right. But I'm sure you get some interesting details from people at times.
And it's true when we have, you know, friends who have marital problems, we definitely, I think we hear about that. Sort of, there's a lot of that kind of advice.
Yeah. You know what? You just reminded me that happens to me at every party too. If I say I'm a high conflict divorce coach, they're like, "What's that?" And then I tell them, they're like,
"Oh,
I know somebody," or "It's me." Like every single time.
Right. It's what happens. I mean, it's sad that it's so prevalent, but I mean, it is true. And people are looking for people to bond with their experience. They're looking for people who understand their experience. And I think a lot of that is kind of what's prevalent in divorce. People feel alone.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they feel, you know, maybe they live in an affluent suburb and they feel like, oh my goodness, I'm the only single mother here and no one's going to invite me anywhere. Or the flip, I'm the only single father. I don't relate to, you know, these other men who's have stay-at-home wives or something like that. You know, it could be isolating. So I think people are looking for that connection also, right? They know that if you'll understand. Whereas to their other friends, they can't maybe be their real self of what's going on in their home.
Yeah. I mean, with our people, it's like, it's not, we often say you can't even compare your situation to other divorces because yours are the craziest of the crazy. And when I meet professionals, they're like, what kind of, you know, like, what kind of person should I refer to you? I'm like, well, you know, that friend who's like stuck in the court for years and theirs like never gets any better and nobody wants to hear them anymore because no one can believe that it actually exists. Like, that's who we deal with all the time. Like, the divorce is over and they're still in court for years and years, just like me. Yep, that's our people.
Very true.
So it's and I think that's why, like, our legal abuse support group, even though we don't just talk about stuff with court, we talk about things that involve a parent trying to turn the kid against, because that's one of the top issues in our community, like one parent trying to turn the kids against the other parent and being separated and dealing with many things with the kids. And how do you co-parent with someone who's really difficult? How are your kids going to be okay with the other parents like that? It's really, really hard. And they feel even more alone when they try to talk to other friends of theirs that are divorced, when it's like, well, my ex doesn't do anything like that. Why doesn't your ex just do what's best for the kids? And then they feel like, oh,
or the flip, right? What are we going to talk? I Googled it, and right.
Okay. Yeah. So that's going to be my next thing to you is let's talk about why Google might not be your friend. And then we'll get into Barstool Counsel, which our friend, Chicagoland attorney, family lawyer, Rayford Palmer did, I think, coin the term for. But first, tell us why Google's not going to be your friend.
Okay, so we always say this, right? It's funny because as lawyers, you always think, like, I'm never going to walk in the doctor's office and be like, so I had tingling in the side of my face and I Googled it and I had a stroke, right? So because the doctor's going to be like on their chart, oh, this person is, you know, this is a little nuts, right? So people do that a lot. I Googled it and the reason that is very difficult in any area of the law, I'm sure, but in our area of the law, everything is so incredibly fact specific, so incredibly driven by personalities. And often if a case is in court frequently, driven a lot by the intangibles that a court, you know, I can't tell you how many times, and my coworker, Christine, and I were talking about this the other day, how a court will render a determination in a trial or a hearing, and they talk about credibility, and they say, while the plaintiff was testifying, I watched the defendant, and I watched the defendant roll his eyes, I watched the defendant sit there like this, I watched him huff and puff, or her, depending on what it is. And so I say that is because there's so much that goes into a case where you can Google something and be like, if I'm married 10 years, do I have to pay alimony? Well, the person who answered may have had a case where the parties' incomes were equal, right? They just don't know the other variables. They don't know, well, maybe in that case, there was no alimony because somebody was on disability, or maybe there was no alimony because somebody was extremely well educated and had the ability to support themselves and there was no need. You just, in a Google search, other than if you look up specific case law, which litigants don't usually do, right? Because that's not super user friendly for them to read. You just don't know all the other factors of the case and all the intangibles of the case. I mean, when a court makes a decision, when you read a published decision, that means your case went to trial or there was a real issue. That doesn't usually happen. So that's like something glaring, something big, something where the court really has something to say or the case wouldn't be published. And so that is really hard. Or sometimes they gain information from like a group that's has a bent. It's an advocacy program. It's a, you know, for whatever reason or not, it has a sway. And so that information is not necessarily exactly the lens through which a court would view it. So I think that is interesting. Other than also, you don't know who's publishing the information, right? Anyone can go on the internet and write whatever they want.
Well, I mean, that was like, still have a bumper sticker on the back of my car from my English teaching days. It said critical thinking is our our latest national deficit or something like that. Because people don't consider the source. And I love that you mentioned that certain advocacy groups do have a bent and a sway, and that just because they're saying it doesn't mean that that's actually true, and that there's a lot of, we say on social media, there's a lot of fear mongering that goes on, and you see a lot of things that just get headlines and lots of engagement, but it doesn't mean that that's the norm or that's what generally happens all the time. And then people get really scared, especially with these horrific family court cases. We're like, oh my gosh, this terrible thing's going to happen to me because I keep seeing articles like this on social media. So we have to calm them down and say, stop looking at some of that stuff. It's just like the most extreme news cases. And then everyone thinks, well, this is how it is now.
That's such a great,
but it's not. Yeah, it's not actually true. Okay, so we talked about Barstool Counsel. So Rayford Palmer, he calls himself Chicagoland family lawyer, and he's also the author of this book called I Just Want This Done. And he's a friend of ours, and he said it's one of the most dangerous things that people can experience, and that's when Barstool Counsel is the person sitting next to you in a bar or friends at party where they tell you what you should be doing with your divorce or what should happen with your custody case because this is what they think or this is what happened with themselves. So it kind of fits in with your Google thing, right?
Right. It's like Google searching in person, right? It's just, right. And people don't know. They could be like, oh, my cousin got divorced one time.
Exactly.
Right. Don't know if they got divorced in California where the law is extremely different than the law in Alabama, right? You don't know what's going on, or you don't know if it's a case that has a presumption of 50-50 parenting time. There's nuances to the law. We don't have a presumption for 50-50 parenting time in the state of New Jersey, but other states do. The presumption is here and then you work backwards. So maybe that person says to somebody, hey, a 50-50 is easy. And they're talking to somebody in New Jersey where the statute and the consideration is different. Or, you know, listen, people exaggerate too. When you're doing a word of mouth, it's like a game of telephone, right? So
yeah.
You tell a tall tale. The best thing people can do when they overhear is give their person like, oh, you're going through a divorce. Here's the name of Lisa. Here's the name of a coach. Here's the name of an attorney. Go get information from a trusted source is really what you should tell people. And I know people do it to me too. I mean, they hear what you do. You're at a party. They'll pull you aside and say, oh, my sister. And you have to be really careful with that.
Yeah, I know. I personally had an experience at a party recently where I'm like, I have to learn my own boundaries because I just, somebody started talking and it went on for 2 hours and I missed socializing, and I just thought I gotta, this is what I do for work, but for fun, it's very draining, and we need to be able to relax and forget about it for a while.
That's a great point of what we do, and something that our boss is big on it on my firm, and we kind of try to remind ourselves about having that break too, because you don't want to suffer from compassion fatigue. You need to make sure, I think, at least this is my perspective, I'm sure other attorneys don't share it, but I think what makes a good family law attorney, what I think makes us at our firm, we have empathy for people, like real empathy for people. And I don't think you can do this job without that real empathy for people, because what we're asking divorce clients often to do is hard. You have a custody battle and you need to make a decision on support. Or sometimes you have to pay alimony to somebody who cheated on you. Or there are so much emotion to business decisions. And that just makes our area of the law so challenging, uniquely challenging compared to other people, which are uniquely challenging for different reasons, right? Tax attorney needs to know the tax code. I couldn't read it and understand it. So that's their area of expertise. But one of the things I think makes us good at what we do is you have to find that empathy for people still. And if you don't care about people really, truly, at the end of the day, it's not the area of law for you. Because people going through, it's like the best people going through the worst time in their lives. As opposed to the old joke about criminal court is the opposite, That's the old joke, right?
Wait.
In family.
What's the old joke? Say the old joke.
The people have the worst behavior on their best behavior in the courtroom. And in the family court, it's that you have the best people on their, worst behavior at the worst time.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point. Yeah.
Oh, you never heard that before?
Oh, no, I've heard it, but I haven't heard those two lines put together like that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, what a contrast.
I'd like to.
Very good, Melissa.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I'm checking the time. I'm like, we've been on for almost an hour. That's been flying by. I knew it would.
I know.
But is there anything else you want to say? Anything that you think we left out? I mean, I'm sure we left out a lot of stuff.
Out a lot, but I don't know. This has just been so fun. When you and I met, I just kind of knew that we could talk about this forever. I think what you do is a great service. So I'm hoping some of our people have listened and they hear what you and your partner do, which I think is a great service to people. I think, some divorce coach does not encompass what you really do. I mean, I don't think that. I think the support you're providing is very helpful. And I think more attorneys should get to know it.
Thank you. And thanks for supporting us.
Problem. I know. I don't know if any of my ladies are here that you've now met some of my friends from all corners of the country, right?
Yeah, I can't tell. I don't know which ones are yours. I see some that are mine, but I'm not sure which ones are yours.
No,
but I see hearts. Hearts are good.
Hearts are good. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, Melissa, how can people find you? So you only do New Jersey, though. But again, you're a unicorn, a divorce attorney, family lawyer with domestic violence background and empathy. Oh, so important.
They can find us. It's Sane Family Law, SEIDEN. And obviously we're on, LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook, but also we have our website and they can find me through you or
I'll put it in the when I post this in like a few minutes, I'll put it in so I'll tag you and Siden too.
Thank you.
All right. Well, you too. And I have a feeling this isn't going to be the last Instagram live we do together.
Tell me. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks, Melissa.
Okay.
Bye.